scariest thing about Genosha wasn't the death or the chaos. It was a thought. The only sane thought you can have when being chased by giant robots that were built to crush you. Magneto was right.
Good lord, this show is straight fire. Disney ought to be kicking themselves for firing Bo DeMaio because this man brought nothing but the best. We got excellent storytelling, solid animation, badass fight scene with my boy Nightcrawler, someone says the thing, and we get one of the best character retcons I've seen in years. In fact, that last one is so good, Marvel should make it canon. That should be Bastion's origin from now on. At this point, if Disney isn't going to bring DeMaio back for the show, Marvel should make him the editor for the X-Books, cause god damn does he know what he's doing. I'm talking deep cuts here. No one was thinking about that waitress from the episode One Man's Worth. No one, except for Bo DeMaio. The way he tied her into Bastion's origin by making her Bastion's mother? Slick. I really want to know why they fired this man. I've seen claims that it was over creative differences. If that's the case, whatever they were, Bo was right. This dude nailed it. You don't get rid of people who are this on point. There's so much to chew on in this episode. It opens with Scott talking to Jean about how Cable is avoiding him. I have to admit, I'm not that keen on this angle. It works. It makes sense that Cable would have daddy issues and doesn't see Jean as his mother. It's not bad, it's just not my thing. The following scene though, oh, I'm all over that one. Cable explains why he came back in time. In his timeline, Bastion infected humans with the same techno-organic virus Sinister implanted into Cable. This resulted in people being born as Prime Sentinels, unaware what they were, but effectively an evolutionary replacement for mutants. The war lasted for 300 years, but instead of resulting in a hellscape dystopia, it's seemingly a utopia where the remaining mutants are used as living tools to serve the now enhanced humans. I like that take on the possible future. We still see how things don't turn out well for mutants, but it's not one of those futures where all hell broke loose and it remained that way. It's closer to what happened historically. Most nations that had an oppressed underclass didn't look like war zones, so it doesn't make sense that humans would destroy all of civilization just to take down mutants. It is a little curious though how Cable will wind up in his current form because that form is based off the timeline where Apocalypse reigned. If he went back to Bishop's time, even that one was different than the Sentinel future we're shown. Maybe the show will address this in the other two parts, but it'd be interesting to see how events changed between the different timelines. Back in the present, Wolverine gets testy over why Cable didn't stop the attack on Genosha, but we find out that he basically couldn't. Every time he tried, he got time shifted, as if time itself was preventing Cable from changing the event. That's a little hard to buy though, because we've seen the X-Men alter events in the series, so why would time stop them here, but not when Bishop and Cable came back to previous times? It's a cool concept, the idea of certain things being inevitable, but in context to the show, it's contradictory. At any rate, someone from Cable's time found something about Bastion's location after the attack on Genosha, so Cable, Cyclops, and Jean decide to check it out. Scott and Cable argue over what they should do, but Jean interrupts them because there's a news report on a leaked video of a very much alive Xavier planning to marry Lalandra, and about Gyric's death, with the X-Men essentially being pinned as murderers and frauds who faked their mentor's death to win support for the mutant cause. This results in many people turning on the X-Men, and some of them show up at the mansion to protest. Meanwhile, Jubilee and Roberto get into it with Roberto's mother over that very issue. Roberto's mother is planning to hold a fundraiser for Genosha, and she takes a dig at the X-Men for covering up what happened with Xavier. Jubilee says that the X-Men were trying to protect Xavier from you people, and Roberto's mother takes offense, and says that thankfully her guests don't think that one bad apple spoils the bunch. I love this scene because it shows the contradictions everyone engages in. Everyone's judging each other, and no one wants to admit their side does anything wrong. In Jubilee's case, she's not thinking about how it looks to the world that the X-Men accused Gyrick of killing someone who is still very much alive. Even if faking Xavier's death led to some support for mutants, lying on that scale would make people distrust any new claims, either from the X-Men or mutants in general. In Roberto's mother's case, she's not seeing her own hypocrisy. She says that she wants to help mutants, but she also doesn't want anyone to know that her son is a mutant. She claims that she's tolerant of her son being a mutant, but later on when Roberto and Jubilee get attacked and chased by Prime Sentinels, his mother supports the Sentinels taking the pair away in power-dampening collars. It's a perfect example of how people tend to see things only from their perspective. Back at the mansion, we get a moment with Jean and Nightcrawler. Rogue is still knocked out, and the pair check in on her. Jean reveals her confusion about her feelings. She has these memories of things she never did, like carrying Nathan and holding him after he was born. I love Kurt's response to this, which is basically, what does it matter if you didn't do those things? You have those feelings, and those feelings are real. He says the same thing about his relationship with Rogue. Mystique wanted nothing to do with him because he was a mutant, and he and Rogue could have easily kept their distance or been enemies, but instead,
We chose not to abandon each other, to let go of the past, and simply be family. Blood is blood. Family is a choice.
that's a major statement, and I can see that bothering people who consider family the most important thing, because they tend to reject the idea of a found family or a family of choice. But this is what happens with many ostracized people. They find others who will welcome them, who will be the family they either lost or never had. That idea of a found family is what the X-Men ultimately represent, and they're usually at their best when they're shown as being an extended family. So that was excellent. Then the show really starts cooking. A still alive Val Cooper, dressed like Bastion, confronts Sinister about working with Bastion, but he's not concerned about Bastion's plan. He only cares about getting mutants for his experiments. Then Cooper talks to Magneto, claiming that she didn't know what would happen and begging him to say something to her, but he remains silent. The show doesn't mention anything about this, but I'm wondering if Magneto was the only one to survive. If he was still alive, then there's a chance that the Morlocks that were with him are also alive too, which means there's a chance that the mutant massacre might get tied into these last two episodes. That's a storyline from the comics where Sinister orders the Marauders to kill the Morlocks. It also got retconned to tie into the Age of Apocalypse storyline. If added in, it would work perfectly with what's been set up so far, and it'd also be cool to see because the episode One Man's Work is what inspired the Age of Apocalypse storyline in the first place. Speaking of inspired storylines, we get one of the best character retcons I've ever seen. Cyclops, Jean, and Cable go to the location, but instead of finding a hidden base, they find Bastion's old home and his mother waiting for him. They check out Bastion's room and find a bunch of drawings of Sentinels. Jean uses her power to read the psychic traces left on it, and she sees Bastion's past. His father was infected by what remained of Nimrod after he got destroyed in One Man's Work, and the Sentinel code was passed down to Bastion, technically making him a mutant. A Sentinel mutant with the ability to communicate with any technology, and an underlying code telling him to eradicate all other mutants. I think this is brilliant, and much better than a comic version where Nimrod gets thrown into the past and randomly winds up with an adult cybernetic body with no memories. The idea that Bastion is another type of mutant and is hunting his evolutionary rival/cousin? Genius. And then there's his childhood. Bastion grew up different, probably considered to be a typical mutant. So there's an irony and hypocrisy to what he's doing. He's persecuting the people he shares the most in common with, while siding with the people who feared and bullied him, but he also wants to change all those humans into something like him, while claiming he's protecting humanity. And the fire keeps burning hotter. We find out that the UN knew about the attack on Genosha because Bastion told them. They may have kept Cooper in the dark about the full extent of the plan, but that's not true for the rest of the UN. They're all in on it. And if that weren't damning enough, it turns out that the plan has been in the works since before Gyrick attacked Xavier. Even worse, people like Dr. Doom and Baron Zemo were in on it too, meaning the UN was actively working with supervillains to take down the mutants. This puts so much of what happened in the series so far in a new light, because everything from the Executioner's actions up to the UN's response to the Genosha attack was probably part of Bastion's plan. Bastion says that he also warned the UN to temper their actions against the mutants because the persecution might lead to sympathy and tolerance. This point about tolerance being a weakness keeps getting hammered home. In the previous episode, we saw it from the mutants' perspective, how many of them are starting to think that their pleas for tolerance may have put them in greater danger. Now we're seeing it from the other side, how Bastion and his ilk think tolerance leads to defeat and extinction. That's their main issue, the fear that mutants will replace humans, so humans need to fight back, even if mutants aren't doing anything to harm them. The show even makes a reference to chat room keyboard warriors finding safe spaces to vent that mutants will not replace them. I admit that one's a little on the nose, but it is how some people feel in the real world. Bastion recruits those people for his cause, but of course, he's just using them, turning them into prime sentinels and then wiping their minds of the act so that they won't know until, as he puts it, some mutant flirts with them in a bar and their sentinel program activates. He tells Val Cooper all of this, just monologuing like a madman, fully aware that she's not going to side with him. When she accuses him of being a threat to humanity, he just smiles. Why? Because this man is playing the long game. He's not worried about the here and now. He's thinking about the future, 300 years into the future, and about his final dream, as his mother puts it. She shows Jean, Scott, and Cable the last drawing Bastion did, which was of the attack on Genosha, something he'd drawn years before. In other words, he's been planning this attack since he was a teenager. Then his mother turns into a Prime Sentinel, meaning this man turned his own mother into a weapon. Now while this goes down, Jubilee and Roberto are at the mall shopping and then get attacked by Roberto's butler, who also turns out to be a Prime Sentinel. Meanwhile, Trish Tilby drops by the mansion to apologize to Beast. While she's there, Beast connects Cerebro to Bolivar Trask's remains so he can find out how many people Bastion has altered. When he flips the switch, the whole globe lights up. Bastion already anticipated this move, so all Beast did was activate all the Prime Sentinels across the planet at the same time, including Trish Tilby. Now that's forward thinking for your ass. This whole sequence is just awesome. Jubilee and Roberto end up crashing into the fundraiser. Roberto says that the Sentinels are after them, but the Sentinels, who still have some sentience, claim that they're there to protect the mutants, and Roberto's mother lets the Sentinels take the pair, proving that she's not one of the good ones. Jean, Cyclops, and Cable get attacked by Bastion's entire neighborhood because Bastion turned all of them into Prime Sentinels. And Trish Tilby just manhandles the X-Men, completely wrecking the mansion in the process. The best part though by far is when Prime Sentinels make it into the mansion and try to kill Rogue, and we get to see Nightcrawler and Wolverine in action. Nightcrawler's fighting with 3 swords, he's using the sword with his tail. We get this cool teleportation perspective when Kurt teleports Wolverine and the Sentinel out to the roof. These two are just jacking up everybody in the scene. The storyboard artists and animators were cooking with this fight. Then Bastion shows up to gloat and he's got some woman with him, and I don't know who she is. I'm guessing it might be Karima Shampadar, who's in the Mega Sentinel, but we barely get to see her. Then Sinister calls in and tells Bastion that Val Cooper let Magneto go, and we get the best scene in the episode, if not the season. Bastion tells Cooper that it was futile to let Magneto go. Cooper calls Bastion a monster, and he's like, I was born this way, completely inverting everything he and other mutant haters have said against mutants. They think mutants should be judged for how they were born, but they don't think that it should work the other way around. Bastion then captures Cooper, and then Cooper delivers this killer monologue.
In Genosha, I felt a lot of things. Pain, grief, admiration for those who fought despite the odds. But you know what the oddest thing was? No one seemed shocked or surprised. Not even me. Yes, I was scared, but really I just had the most profound sense of déjà vu. As if past, present, and future didn't matter and never had. Because we always end up in the same ugly place. Thing is, Magneto knows us better than Charles ever did. Knows we know better. That most of us experience tragedies like Genosha as a bit of déjà vu before getting on with our day. But the scariest thing about Genosha wasn't the death or the chaos. It was a thought. The only sane thought you can have when being chased by giant robots that were built to crush you. Magneto was right.
I'm just going to have to let that one sit for a minute because she's not wrong. Magneto was right. History is full of examples of this, and so is the present. Obviously, no one working on the show could have known what would happen in the Middle East for the last 7 months, but damn if that monologue isn't on point about that. We know what happens when you let people behave that violently towards another group. We know what happens when we let people pass laws targeting other groups. We know what happens when we let people consider others to be inherent threats, degenerates, less than human. When people are guided by that level of fear and hate, there's only one thing that comes to their minds: extinction. Not for them, but for the ones they hate. And when faced with that kind of reality, there's only one thing for that hated group to say: enough. And with that, Magneto sends out an EM pulse that takes out all the Prime Sentinels across the planet and shuts down pretty much every mechanical device. That's an extreme act, one that cements Magneto as a villain, but unlike the Executioner, Magneto actually does have a point. What Bastion did, the extremes that he went to, that is how situations like this played out historically. The success of the civil rights movements of the 20th century were the exception, not the norm. And as people have found out in recent years, those successes are easily rolled back, and hatred is just waiting to get its second wind. There are few options left to people in that situation other than to fight back. So, unfortunately, Magneto was right. Now back at the mansion, Wolverine can't believe that Magneto actually did it and effectively declared war on humans. He says, "Where's the professor when you need him?" And arrive, the professor does. He crash lands into the mansion, hopes that he's not too late, he is, and then summons his X-Men. God damn, this episode was putting out fire with gasoline, and we still got 2 more episodes to go. This is what it looks like when you have a solid show. Disney, y'all might need to call up Bo, work out your problems, and get him back on the show, because whatever it is that makes things work, he's got it. This was excellent. This was so good, I've even seen people who trashed the show as woke, eating crow, claiming that they like it now. I don't know how much of that is genuine or if they're just riding the popularity wave since everybody likes the show, but it did happen. We need more shows like this. This is great storytelling, great action. You got people coming back for more. See what happens when you put people who are actually passionate about the concepts, the characters, and the story in charge of the show? This is the way to go. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.